continues filling out his incoming administration with more historic nominations. Fox's Ali Rafa joins us live in Wilmington, Delaware right now with more. Ali, every single day we're hitting you with these new picks. Can you tell us what the latest is today?
Hey, Daytona. Well, with this pick, President-elect Joe Biden is keeping to his promise to form the most diverse cabinet in U.S. history. If confirmed, retired four-star Army General Lloyd Austin will be the first black Secretary of State the country has ever had. Biden said during this event that this pick is personal to him. Austin served as commander of U.S. and coalition forces in Iraq during President Obama's first term in office. But to run the Pentagon, someone has to be a civilian for at least 7 years. Austin retired just 4 years ago, so that means he's going to require a special waiver from Congress to fill this role. And now senators on both sides of the aisle have to decide whether they're going to grant him this, just like they did for retired General James Mattis 4 years ago. Some Democrats even are already saying that they're putting their foot down and saying they're not going to do it. They're not willing to bend the rules. But Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is already saying that he's backing Biden's pick. And so after today's announcement, that really leaves just one of the top level cabinet picks left for Biden to announce. That's the pick for Biden's Attorney General. Biden teased that earlier this week, saying we should expect an announcement by the end of the week, Daytona.
Ali, there's been several breaking news stories. Let's talk about Hunter Biden as well, because the Biden transition was even a part of this breaking news. What happened today, and what can we be looking forward to in the future as well?
Yeah, so earlier this evening, the president-elect's son, Hunter Biden, announced that federal prosecutors had opened up an investigation into his taxes. He's saying that he is confident he handled his tax affairs legally and appropriately. But Biden's transition team says that they found out about this investigation that actually started in 2018 just yesterday. Biden himself issuing a statement saying that he's proud of his son and that his son has only emerged stronger out of the past recent months of just endless attacks, personal attacks against him. Now, we know that this probe comes weeks after an election where President Trump and his allies attacked Hunter Biden and the president-elect regarding Hunter Biden and them saying that he used his father's influence to enrich his business affairs. But we're learning, Fox is told by a source familiar with the investigation, that this is not connected to the attacks the Trump campaign and their allies made against Hunter during the campaign. Fox is also being told that Biden himself is not a subject of any investigation. And if you remember last year, then candidate Biden pledged not to interfere with any Justice Department investigation. He also said to let the Justice Department make the judgment about whether someone should be prosecuted. So Daytona, no doubt that all eyes, a lot of attention is going to be on this affair, whether Biden addresses this and what comes next as far as this investigation into Hunter's taxes.
Ali, kind of interesting information coming out from one of our very own reporters, Fox's John Roberts. I'm going to pull up one of his tweets from earlier today. I'm not sure if you saw it or not, but he's saying sources tell Fox News that Biden was made aware of the investigation yesterday. Before then, the investigation was, quote, covert. Sources say DOJ is very sensitive about moving an investigation from covert to overt during an election if it could potentially affect the outcome. I'm curious, what do you think about this tweet, and what is the difference between covert and overt?
Well, Daytona, I'm not familiar with that tweet. I haven't seen it yet. We do know that Fox has reached out to the Department of Justice for comment on this. They have not responded, but you know, we know that during this election, Hunter Biden's affairs was a key topic to President Trump's attacks on the Biden campaign. You know, it was widely said that President Trump had kind of used up all of his attacks on Biden, so he kind of relayed into personal attacks on his son and his family. But we're just going to have to see where this progresses as far as John Roberts' tweet and the president's reaction to this.
Yeah, obviously a long-standing investigation right there that will continue to follow. My last question for you is, what can we expect from President-elect Joe Biden going forward tomorrow?
So we know Biden will receive his daily presidential briefing, and we know that he will be meeting with his transition advisors tomorrow, but we don't expect to see him in public at all. We do know that he teased actually during that event earlier today that his wife, Jill Biden, will actually travel to D.C. to give food boxes to U.S. troops, and one can only imagine that if this is a public event and reporters are there, they will definitely be asking his wife, Jill Biden, about this.
All right, great to hear, and I'm sure we'll be following that story tomorrow here on News Now from Fox. That's Fox's Ali Rafa out there in Wilmington, Delaware. Thank you so much, Ali, for your reporting.
Thank you.
So again, you're watching News Now from Fox. All of these developments coming down with President-elect Biden, and obviously this breaking news coming out today about Hunter Biden and those taxes. Like I said, this is a years-long investigation. I believe it started in 2018, and we will be doing further interviews on what these lawsuits are and what we need to be keeping our eyes on. But speaking of lawsuits, dozens of states and the federal government actually sued Facebook today in twin antitrust lawsuits, alleging that the social media giant has abused its dominance in the digital marketplace and engaged in anti-competitive behavior. If that confuses you, that makes two of us. This is a really interesting situation that's going on with Facebook. Obviously, Facebook in the headlines quite a bit lately. And Andrew Kraft, my fellow co-host here at News Now from Fox, did a really great interview with Charlotte Slayman. She is a technology and antitrust expert. She's actually also a former FTC lawyer. So we'll listen in on their conversation that they had just in the past hour or so, and then we'll get to more political headlines as well.
A director of policy at the nonprofit Public Knowledge, focusing on competition. And Charlotte, we're going to speak rather about anti-competition today regarding this lawsuit that 48 attorneys general and the FTC, of which you're a former attorney for, have filed against Facebook. Kind of what is the nature of this lawsuit, and what are they trying to do essentially with Facebook?
Yeah, so the claim is monopolization, that Facebook has been using its market power to maintain an illegal monopoly. The ways that the attorneys general and the FTC claimed that they did that was first through anti-competitive acquisitions, through purchasing companies like Instagram and WhatsApp, and secondarily through withholding interoperability, making it more difficult for competitors to communicate on the Facebook platform.
So essentially, though, what Facebook is responding with is that, the FTC already proved those sales when they were acquired by Facebook. So I guess that would be Facebook's point of view at the moment. How do you respond to that?
So the FTC does not actually approve mergers. The Hart-Scott-Rodino Act requires that companies as large as Facebook and smaller than Facebook as well, but many companies have to submit their merger applications to the Federal Trade Commission in advance so that they have an opportunity to sue if they want to block the merger. But they are not giving a stamp of approval. They are simply deciding whether they want to sue to block or not. The FTC did decide in those cases not to sue to block, but they still have the right to do so now.
I see. And, with Instagram and WhatsApp, millions of Americans use those applications on their mobile devices and what have you. So essentially, if this went the wrong way for Facebook, what could, Americans like you and me be seeing? Could we, could they have to sell off those holdings essentially if it was ruled against them?
It's possible. That is one of the available remedies. There are other ways that the court might try to address the harm that the FTC claims has been going on for 10 years now. But I think the real ultimate goal is for there to be competition against Facebook that consumers can actually access. What's really difficult today is if you want to leave Facebook, you have no way to reach the friends and businesses and institutions that you might be interacting with on Facebook because of the network effects. This means that people who are on Facebook can only communicate with people on Facebook. The key that we need is for competitors to be able to communicate across the network. That way, if a user doesn't like what's happening on Facebook, they can go to a different network and still reach all of those important contacts that they've made on Facebook.
I see. And just, you study this so closely. Were you surprised? I mean, 48 attorneys general. I mean, that's almost the entire country. And from what I understand, this is in conjunction with, just a couple, I believe a couple months ago that the DOJ filed their own lawsuit, antitrust lawsuit, against not only Facebook, but, Amazon, Google, what have you. So there's this kind of, massive effort undertaken right now at the federal level and the state level.
That's right. There's incredible momentum. I think a lot of people are waking up to the huge competitive concerns that we have with what I call dominant digital platforms. That's companies in the position of Facebook, Google, or Amazon, as you suggest, that have this real gatekeeper power for so many other businesses that rely on them and users as well. So the fact that 48 attorneys general throughout the country are part of this case and the bipartisan Federal Trade Commission, the Republican chairman, as well as 2 of the Democratic commissioners signed off on this complaint, it really shows that there is a lot of interest. So I'm hopeful that Congress, too, will take note. They have been doing a lot of in-depth work in this space as well. But showing the bipartisan support for this case today, I think, is a huge step forward for that congressional effort, too.
So, Charlotte, I'm just kind of curious, too, kind of focusing a little bit on the efforts, say Facebook and YouTube have been making to tamp down on misinformation on their platforms in regards to the election and the pending vaccine. When the FTC looks at those efforts, does it kind of take that into consideration, or is it completely separate when they're dealing with, accusations of monopolies and what have you? So is there anything that they would look at to kind of, consider it as a reprieve for these companies, or not really? They're not really related.
So it's largely separate. The way that I do think it's related is that that's one of the policies that might inspire users to try a different social network if they had the capability to do that. So I think that's one of the reasons that actually changing our policies and enforcing antitrust laws to really get some competition here is so important. I think people recognize that there is a lot of misinformation on Facebook. A lot of people are facing harassment on Facebook. Facebook needs to do a better job with content moderation, making sure that they're dealing with that misinformation and harassment. And maybe if there was really competition and consumers felt that they really could leave and go to an alternative social network, Facebook would feel that pressure to do a better job.
So I guess the essence of my question was essentially like, through those efforts that those social media companies are doing, can they show regulators, at the FTC or attorneys general in court that they're at least trying, or does that not hold up much?
No, I don't think that would be a very strong argument against these antitrust claims.
I see. Kind of like going forward, what are you going to be looking for with these lawsuits, especially at the federal and now the state level? And time and time again, we see the big tech CEOs come and testify in front of the Senate and the House, and they really get reamed. So we won't really be open to that in these court proceedings going forward. But what will you be looking forward to?
So this is an opportunity to have much more in-depth questioning of Facebook executives, including Mark Zuckerberg, who may be deposed as part of this case. But as you say, a lot of that happens behind closed doors. I do think the congressional process is really where our focus ought to be for now. Antitrust lawsuits take a long time. It's possible this case could be going on for years with all of the appeals. It's a very long process. And at the end of that, I'm hopeful that we can have some real changes to how Facebook is operating. But the congressional process has the opportunity to impact the entire sector, all of the powerful digital platforms. So I think that's really where our focus should be, trying to improve the sector as a whole and provide ongoing oversight of this industry.
And just lastly, Charlotte, it kind of seems like there is this broad agreement, especially in government, in the public sector. It's pretty bipartisan from what I understand, kind of everyone versus Facebook, everyone versus either Google or Amazon. There isn't really, you're seeing these fault lines among where people lie and where people fall. Have you seen that as well?
Yes, there is a lot of bipartisan interest in the problems around competition with these platforms. The next step, of course, is identifying what are the tools that we need to provide to a regulator in order to actually remedy some of these problems. So that's the big next step that folks are working on now.
All right, Charlotte Slayman there from Public Knowledge. We thank you so much for joining us here on News Now from Fox. Daytona, back to you.
Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton went to.
All right, you're watching News Now from Fox. That was a fantastic interview done by our very own Andrew Kraft. When he steps back up here, he will absolutely dive a little bit deeper into that interview. Just a great get. But I want to bring you some other news today as well. Also involving big tech, YouTube will remove videos and content that allege widespread voter fraud in the 2020 presidential election. That's starting on Wednesday, today. Wednesday was the country's safe harbor deadline, or the deadline by which state-level election audits and recounts are supposed to be completed. This is something that YouTube wrote in a Wednesday blog post. I'll read it off for you. Given that, we will start removing any piece of content uploaded today or anytime after that misleads people by alleging that widespread voter fraud or errors change the outcome of the 2020 U.S. presidential election, in line with our approach towards historical U.S. presidential elections. Now, Senator Josh Hawley, who is a Republican out of Missouri, he tweeted this. Google owns YouTube, officially announcing free speech no longer allowed. This is part of what he tweeted. If you have concerns about election integrity, you must sit down and shut up. Repeal Section 230 and break these companies up. Videos claiming President Trump or any other candidate besides President-elect Joe Biden won the 2020 election due to widespread software glitches or counting errors, for example, will be removed starting today. YouTube will allow news covering issues related to the 2020 election, so as long as there is sufficient education, documentary, scientific, or artistic context. That's a part of what this blog also said. Our main goal going into the election season was to make sure we're connecting people with authoritative information while also limiting the reach of misinformation and removing harmful content. The work here is ongoing, and we wanted to provide an update. That's what YouTube is saying. Starting Wednesday, YouTube will update its information panel linking to Google's results panel, which used information from the Associated Press and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency's rumor control page to prevent the spread of false information. The updated panel will link to the Office of the Federal Register's 2020 Electoral College results page. Since November 3rd, YouTube's third-party fact-check panels have appeared more than 200,000 times above search results regarding voter fraud narratives, such as those related to Dominion voting systems. So again, this is coming up on Wednesday. I believe they're saying of next week, but I will double check on that for you. Again, you're watching News Now from Fox. And that was our political rundown. We got a couple other things to hit for you as well. I showed you earlier, but another one of our headlines is these lawsuits going on in Texas as well, with Attorney General Ken Paxton filing alongside several other states as well. So I'm going to play that out for you here on News Now from Fox.
Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton went directly to the U.S. Supreme Court to challenge elections in 4 states. For perspective on that, we say good morning to constitutional law attorney David Cole from the firm Lynn, Pinker, Hurst, and Schwegman. So, compared to a snowball's chance in hell, how much of a chance does Ken Paxton's lawsuit have?
I'd probably bet on the snowball. It's a real uphill climb because if Texas can sue Wisconsin, Michigan, so on and so forth here, then Vermont can sue Texas about us fracking too much or something like that. It opens up an endless possibility, none of it very good. So that basic principle is going to be a real challenge for him. It would be a real, the Supreme Court would have to really, really, really want to expand its original jurisdiction and take on a whole lot more cases.
Right, and we talk about original jurisdiction. You just don't take a lawsuit directly to the United States Supreme Court. And Ken Paxton, I mean, I know that. I'm not a lawyer. He should know that.
I'll give him points for gutsiness there. There is a thing, original jurisdiction. It's designed for disputes between states that can't really be resolved in other courts. For example, Texas and Oklahoma had a running thing back in the 1920s that the Supreme Court resolved about what part of the Red River was our boundary. New York and New Jersey had a lawsuit about 20 years ago about who owned Ellis Island. But aside of that, which happens once, twice a term, you just don't see this kind of thing every day because it's obviously once you take one, you take 1,000.
So the big issue was these several states, all of them won by Joe Biden, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, that sent unsolicited mail-in ballot applications to all voters. Several other states do this. I think there are 5 other states that already do that. No lawsuits against them.
It is a little odd that, well, it's no secret why they want the result to change. If you're concerned about election integrity, you would sue in all these states. And of course, mail-in ballot, there are, I think, 4 states, maybe 5, that only use mail-in ballot for their balloting for their presidential elections. It's a secure form of voting. And there are 30, 40 lawsuits so far about bits and pieces and aspects of this election that have yet to turn up any systemic fraud with the use of mail-in ballots.
As a Texas taxpayer, I mean, am I paying for this lawsuit that any worthwhile attorney thinks has no chance of succeeding? Am I paying for this?
It looks to me from the cover that you are. The Attorney General, of course, gets paid no matter what. It's a state agency, but he appears to have retained a special counsel, which he has the right to do, an outside lawyer to assist, and I assume that person is not working for free. So it does appear, however small it may be in the great scheme of our state's budget, that you are picking up the tab for this lawsuit by Texas. Okay.
Of course, Ken Paxton has been under indictment for 5 years on state securities charges. He is also reported, the FBI never confirms it, reportedly under investigation by the FBI for some federal charges. There is speculation, it is only that he is shopping for a presidential pardon by going to bat for the president's reelection campaign.
Well, it's, there's speculations about all sorts of things these days, but the distinction you make between federal and state charges is just mission critical on that. The president's pardon power does extend to federal crimes. It does not extend to anything that a state may decide to prosecute. So President Trump's ability to perhaps pardon himself would not reach any New York state investigations. And the same would hold true here with Ken Paxton in the state of Texas.
All right, David Cole, as always, thank you very much.
And as you can see right here, Donald Trump tweeting out saying, wow, at least 17 states have joined Texas in the extraordinary case against the greatest election fraud in the history of the United States. Thank you. We're also getting reports tonight that the president personally asked Republican Senator Ted Cruz of Texas if he would argue a long shot election lawsuit. This one that we're talking about right now, seeking to overturn the election results in 4 battleground states, should the Supreme Court agree to take it up. This is what sources are saying today. Of course, this is a situation that we will continue to follow here on News Now from Fox, but that is going to do it today for our political rundown as we break down all of the day's top headlines. Join us here on News Now from Fox for all of your nonstop news throughout the day.